Awesome. Well, thank you, Stephen, for coming on and talking with me.
I'm always welcome.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute.
No, you were just saying all the same kind of stuff, but I was saying to someone about with Putin. And so, yeah, look, really what we want to talk about today was obviously a lot's happened. I mean, the Russia-Ukraine situation, which is obviously, as you're rightly pointing out, an excuse by Western governments to do all kinds of whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
So really with the Great Reset, the question that I want to ask is how close are we to the Great Reset really now with everything going on? Like, are we a step closer? Are we accelerating towards it, or is it still some way away?
It's happening now. We're in it. It's already happening. If you actually have a look at the timeline of the Great Reset, and it got its term, the Great Reset, from I think it was a 2020 speech at the World Economic Forum, which actually outlined what it was. But it's actually been in progress probably, for my latest lot of research and talking to people, since about the early 2000s. And the World Economic Forum has been putting its puppets in place all over the world through their Young Global Leaders program. And people like Jacinta Ardern are an alumni. So is Trudeau, so is Macron. And do you see a theme between these people, that they're all, Marxists at heart and locked down, and they've done some of the worst stuff in the world? Well, that's because that's what they've been taught at these young leaders. And my research is digging, and I've just found out that Andrew Bragg, which is a Liberal member of the Liberal Party, is currently in the current crop. And I know from past experience of the LNP that there's several others. And that just goes to show you that pretty much the British Western democracies have really been infiltrated by this WEF, and they got to ScoMo. He wasn't one of them, but he's now been threatened with whatever, and is part of it. So
you can see in ScoMo's face, but he's not on board with hardly any of this. But he's into it,
100%. And then you have a look at the likes of Christina Keneally is one of them. Can never remember her name. She's that unmemorable. Senator Sarah Hanson-Young is another one. And these are all people that will, if Labor get in at the next election, they'll be controlling a lot of the bullshit that will go along. So yeah, to answer your question, Matt, we're in it. I reckon we're probably 2 to 3 years now into it. They know that this is our last ditch effort, that they've got to control the 2022 through to 2024 elections. If they lose those elections and start losing their grip, that they know that they'll lose their grip totally going into 2032, which will then 2032, 2034 will just swing everything across to China, Russia, India as the next empire. So,
I mean, this is a completely off the topic that I was going to ask, but what kind of threats would they be using against ScoMo and other kind of people? Because obviously it's pretty severe. I've got my own theories, but what kind of threats would they be using?
Look, I'm not 100% certain. It'll be something from his past, or it'll be something from his wife's past that they do. And this is how they do it. They all have these massive files on everyone. Anyone that gets into politics, they go and dig the dirt, and everyone has dirt units. So it'll be something like that. It could even be just as simple as that they are threatening with his job. You got to remember, this guy, up until he entered politics, was probably earning $100,000 a year at best, and that was probably his earning potential. Now he's prime minister. He's $500,000-$700,000 a year. That's a lot of that's a lot of money for a lot of people to lose, and it's more so than the power. So that's what that's the sort of stuff that it'll be. You got to remember, a lot of these guys are weak people.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, if you kind of let them know that, hey, all we have to do is say a few things around the place, the next minute you got countries wanting to go to war or banks going to call in loans on you, and that would be enough too, I'd imagine.
100%. The threat of us not being part of the financial system would have been a huge threat. And that's why the net zero thing, that's why he rolled over on that was, and I've actually heard it from guys that were over there, was the threat of Australia losing its credit rating and its ability to borrow.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So if you weren't on board with that, that's what they're going to do. They're just going to crush you financially.
So here's my next question. So what's going on in Canada with this state of emergency and trying to freeze money in protests? That really got me like, wow, this is kind of what I always thought would happen. They would incite civil unrest, get protests, and then use it as an excuse to crack down, bring in tighter restrictions. So what is that really telling us, Stephen, in your perspective?
Oh, from my perspective, mate, it's they're testing how far they can go. I put it as the truckers are one, because if you've got to use these type of powers, and meanwhile, the last person to use powers like this was Hitler.
Yep.
Was Hitler in 1939 when he started confiscating people's bank accounts. He started, kicking people out of their homes and confiscating their homes and their fortunes and all that sort of stuff. It is the exact same thing that has been applied here. They're down to the level of if you're a trucker and you got arrested and that you don't see your pet for 8 days, your pet is lost. They are just all out going to destroy these people. Banks have been threatened with losing their license if they do not confiscate the accounts and close the accounts of the people that... Now, when you read the laws, it's anyone who supports or aids them. So just me and you on here now, if we said anything to and look, I support them for whatever they've done, I could have my bank accounts closed if I was in Canada for that one statement.
Wow.
That's how far these guys have gone. The elites now know that they are on the losing end of the COVID push. That's why they're trying to create other demons out there. They are now showing their full hand that they have no regard for anyone below them, and that they're a cartel. That it is 100% dictatorship. The next thing he'll do is suspend elections.
Really?
I reckon he'll do that. He'll find some excuse to suspend elections because of the threat of violence or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say grasping at straws, I actually lost it the other day with laughter. Don't know if you saw the article, but there was an article that came out in Queensland talking about concerns about an outbreak of chickenpox and recommending that everyone hurry up and get vaccinated quick smart against chickenpox. And I thought, you just couldn't make this stuff up. Did you read that article?
Mate, I've read 3 or 4 different articles around that, but the journalists now, are really grasping at straws. Half of them know what they're writing is crap, but they just can't do anything else about it. They're sort of at the mind where if I don't write this, I'm going to lose my job.
Well, cancel culture is a very real thing. I saw today that a senator, she was pushing about the whole transgender woke sport thing to try and let women compete in sport, and was getting hammered by it. And then ScoMo got up and actually supported her bill, and she's getting hammered. Like, what's the proof? I mean, who really wants this kind of stuff? Even though I think on every poll I've seen, over 90% of people saying we want it to be that way. Like, I think it's about 7 or 8% or 9% at most are kind of wanting this current situation. So,
but it's always the minority, and this is the problem when you try to do anything and make everyone equal on material terms, you have to go to the smallest denominator to make it work. So that's why with the Great Reset they say you'll own nothing and be happy, and you'll rent everything. Is because the only way they can make everyone equal is to make everyone have nothing. And that goes for an identity, male, female, a job, you'll be put into a class system. We're talking about going back to the type of clan system that India and the Middle East has. Where if you're in this station, that's where you get. If you're in this station, that's where you are. That's what happens when you try to do anything on a material equality basis rather than on a moral or a performance equality basis. So if you try to do it from I can be of someone of equal because of my performance and my power to earn or whatever, that is different than forcing everyone to be on a material basis. So yeah, that's the biggest problem with all these people.
Yeah, and of course it leads to the next question, which we've got up here about this. Digital IDs and what this could actually mean. As I see it, I have no doubt that they're going to use this protest or other stuff to give excuses, especially the war in Ukraine. I think there's a 80% chance we're going to start saying this shows the need to have digital ID to stop terrorists, to stop this kind of stuff. What's your feeling on that?
Well, the other thing is, mate, we've had digital IDs for a long time. We've had passports now for 100 years.
Yeah.
And then over the time, they've got facial recognition in. So there's a digital ID. Everyone's got driver's licenses. Everyone's got Medicare cards. You've got the director's ID now. So what's starting to happen is all the little agencies right around the world, and this is happening around the world, they're all creating their own ID fiefdom because they don't want to share. And we've had this for a long, long time. The worst one is a tax file number. If you've got a tax file number, you're tracked everywhere because it's linked to your bank accounts. It's linked to, your tax filings. It's linked to any credit report you do. The other one is your credit score. That's a tracking instrument. So we've had this for so long.
Yeah.
But now everyone accepts it. The next thing, though, the next stage is going down, like you've said, is it'll be mandatory. That you'll be mandatory scanned to get into a doctor's clinic, to get into a hospital, to get into a car, to get into somewhere like that. That's where they'll take this next. And all the little agencies will link all their IDs together so they get all your information in one silo rather than having to try and bridge 10 silos as they've got it now.
Yeah, centralized ID, totalitarian world government. Yeah.
So we're seeing that already. And it's been coming for and this is why I always joke about everyone that says they're against the Australia ID, but they turn around straight away and go, oh, but it's all right to have a Medicare card or a driver's license or passport. But there's no difference because all that is just another agency that wants an ID for you. It's a weird thing. There's no need for any of it, to be honest.
No, it also brings to a social credit systems, which is what, I noticed, like, literally, it's quite humorous, but it got me thinking. I got banned on Facebook, Stephen, for 30 days. And the reason why, after all my appalling Dr. Bill posts, which really should have got me banned for the rest of my life, but I never get banned for them. I think the two main bans I've had, one of them was I got banned for 3 days for a joke where I offered myself as a sugar baby. And the second one was for a joke about Jesus, where someone mentioned about him going into the temples and the moneylenders. And I said, didn't he ever whip? So I said, maybe we should whip a few more bankers. And I got banned for promoting hate speech and violence. But I thought,
against bankers, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought, imagine if that had been my bank account,
Yeah, and that's where it'll get to, where whatever you say, if you say something on social media, they'll run it through the algo, and then if your score comes out, it's like your credit score to try and get a bank account, to try and get a home loan or something, right? If your score goes down low enough, I will turn off your bank account, or will restrict your spending to $50 a day, or $50 a week or something. This is where it's happening. And we're seeing it in China now. It's happening, guys that I know in China and all that sort of stuff, they're saying, they put something up on social media, and then the next day they get a warning from the local police come knocking on their door. So
really,
yeah. And especially if you're not a member of the party. So I've got friends up there that are members of the party and who aren't, And the ones who aren't members of the party, they get absolutely hammered all the time. Because if you're a member of the party, that puts you in the top category of the in the points, and it has a multiplier effect. So yeah. So if you're a businessman, you're not in the party, you must be on the opposite side. So.
Well, yeah, I've seen videos posted on Facebook in Melbourne and New Zealand, the people who went to protest, then had the police stop around the next day, and all the police said to them was, "We noticed you at the protest. We just come to let you know remind you of your rights, that you're allowed to protest, but peaceful protest." And what else? I said, "No, that's it." And they're like, "Well, what are you doing coming and stalking me on that one?" They said, "Oh, no, we just want to remind you to keep it peaceful." And literally, that's what's happening now.
Well, and it's happening here in Queensland. I've heard of people that have been to protests. Mind you, it's only if you're protesting against the government or against something the government. If you're super gluing yourself to the road and on about bloody gay whales or rights for gay whales or something, yeah, and you're not getting done. But people are getting pulled over, and your car was seen next to this protest.
Really?
And stuff like that, yeah. And they're using profiling a lot. Here in Queensland, especially, I'm hearing a lot of people say that, they've been leaving a club at a certain time and, certain look of cars and all this and stuff. The profiling is it's really bad in Australia. So.
Neil, the thing that happened with me, I remember it gave me the option to appeal against the decision. And of course, I instantly clicked yes. And it came up, said, "Our apologies. We're short on staff at the moment because of COVID. However, we hope to see you back in 30 days. And I just thought, imagine if that was my bank account. That's all I was thinking.
Yep. Yeah. And this is the problem. The biggest problem with a lot of this stuff is with the emergency stuff up in Canada, and other places, the shit that's happening in New Zealand as well, social credit scoring, the drive of digital IDs. What I fear, though, is it's going to drive people who into things like crypto, who aren't there to trade and get in and out, but are thinking it's going to be a long-term store, and then we end up with a crypto-style seizure like they did with gold in 1933.
Oh, yes.
And then all of a sudden they drive you out of one system into another system to make it easier for them to grab all your assets. And that's what I fear is part of this plan.
That's actually interesting. I didn't even think of that. I mean, because the only thing I thought about was our mutual friend, Peter, the Vedic astrologer. He told me that he and 9 astrologers did a project on Bitcoin when it started in 2009, and all of them got the same thing independently. They all got that, number one, that Satoshi was was never really existed, and it was all started from Russia and the government as an experiment. And but number 2, in 2027, the crypto experiment would end and they'd take everything back from everyone. That's what he said that 9 different astrologers got from their charts. Now, whether it's true or not, it would back up what you just said.
Yeah, and it's also also lining up with what I'm seeing out there in the cycles and some of the stuff that we've been doing is that they will take crypto away from people, especially because of the likes of Facebook and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and governments actually launching their own, so they won't want competition. The same as legal tender. Like if you and I print money, it's illegal. So they'll do the same thing with digital assets. So they'll give you 20 days to roll it over into their system, or they'll just lock you out. And even if you've got it in cold wallets, that'll be the worst thing, because you'll have it in a cold wallet and won't even be able to access the system to actually be able to transfer it into a new system. So it'll be a weird and wonderful place. But that's one of the things that I've been worried about for a long time with crypto. Go your hardest, make as much money as you can at the moment, but convert it into real assets as you go. Convert it into real cash or real something as you go. So
it's so interesting because I Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to realise that my paranoia, which a lot of people thought I was a bit over the top, just about everything paranoid seems to be true. And the other thing that, for example, I'm even nervous of property. I am certain that eventually governments are going to want to have a crack at properties. I mean, I'm probably completely being irrational, but nothing would surprise me in this current environment.
Well, they do now. Australia has one of the worst records of governments confiscating property.
Mm.
You know, the forced reclamation for projects in Australia is, you know, God, there's a court case every second day about it. You know, the problem is we're not like the US, where you have a property right that is actually a true property right. The biggest problem is here. Okay, we have Torrens title. Yeah, it's a great system to register what you have, but you technically don't own it, because the government owns below you and the government owns above you. So you don't have rights to anything either side of what is floating on top. You know, so your property, and this is why people say to me, what do you prefer, leasehold or freehold? And I go, well, probably leasehold, because the government won't confiscate something that it already owns. You know, so you know, it's just a different way of looking at it.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, in fact, my theory here, which I've got as well, is that mandates lifting a form of psycho-ops. In other words, suddenly lifting them all. A lot of people have been celebrating on Facebook and everywhere. And I've been saying, well, I highly doubt the government all woke up and felt, oh, shit, it was really nasty of us to be mean to these poor little babies. Let's just kind of lift these mandates. No doubt that the phase of testing is finished, and it's just kind of getting people to kind of celebrate to get ready for the next phase. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. It's a false sense of security, because they go, oh yeah, we're lifting the mandates, but then you have a look at all the conditions associated with it. It's like, well, you haven't lifted a lot, you know, you've just, and that sort of stuff. Everything they've been doing has been to make people compliant, which is psycho-ops. It's what they did during all the world wars. You know, flood people with fear and pamphlets and all this sort of stuff that they'd read. So back in the days, the airdrops of pamphlets of the social media of today, and all that small, short snippet stuff, it's all worked out. You know, governments have there is the Office of Propaganda,
Yeah.
you know, inside our military, you know, which is there. They say it's to, you know, for you know, psycho ops on the enemy, but who's to say that the government doesn't reckon we're the enemy? You know, and I would actually say that they think we're the enemy. Well, no, they think we're the enemy. Just have a look at what Trudeau's doing, and have a look at Europe. You know, Europe's just a basket case. And
Awesome.
yeah, and the stupid thing about it is everything they've done about masks and PPE and all that throughout this this pandemic. Not once have they talked about the environmental impact. So if they're so concerned about the environment, wouldn't they make sure that all the masks and that were biodegradable? You know, or disposed off in a way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's all brainwashing.
Yeah, in fact, it makes me think of the next one about interest rates expected to rise. Is it fair to say, from what I'm seeing, that we're certainly looking very similar signs that lead up to the Great Depression and eventual a big kind of meltdown, reset, or cataclysmic event over the next few years? Would you agree?
100%. So interest rates are going to rise and going to keep rising, because what that'll do is that'll force the mum and dads out of the market and allow the cashed up firms, the BlackRocks of the world. Look at BlackRock; it's going around the world now, hoovering up homes, and hoovering up multifamily, hoovering up farms, because they've got so much cash, and they don't care if the interest rates go up to 5, 6, 7%, because most of theirs is pension money. So you know they really don't care. The mum and dads and everyone else who's got to get loans, Well, it forces them out of the market. It means that there's more properties that the in-know investors can get their hands on, and so on and so forth. So that's what's happening. But it's not just interest rates. Inflation is the biggest interest rate, and it's the biggest sapper of savings, because the more and more things go up, the more and more inflation goes. And it's not just monetary value. People start making stuff smaller. Go back to the 70s when the Big Mac was this big and now it's this big, and it's still roughly the same price. That's an inflation. Your chocolate bars, your packets of chips, a loaf of bread, everything used to be bigger. Now it's smaller. And that's all part, and this was all seen but before the Great Depression. Making stupid laws, invoking stupid laws, prohibition, an example, and I reckon the net zero is our prohibition thing, and that had devastating effects going into the Great Depression, because it created a whole underclass society of people that, even though it was 1930, was it 1928 or 1930 when they dropped prohibition, but it had already entrenched a mafia and an underclass that was then also another tax on the people. So we are seeing a lot of signs of stuff the same. Government overreach, government's trying to control the economy is the biggest one, and not believing in a business cycle. You've got to let things fail. You've got to let everything go through a cycle. If you try and cut that cycle off at the knees, you end up with a Great Depression. And we could have something very similar when, I would say, towards the 2030s rather than the 2025. I'd put it at the back end.
Right.
We've got so much money being pumped into the economy at the moment, it's not funny.
Yeah.
So that's got to wash its way through, and that's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, let's see the next question. So obviously one question asked by Joan and Tony reflects this, so where the hell do we invest in and keep? So really, what can the sovereign do to protect their assets? In other words, is not basically living their system hoping it works when you and I know it's going to end. What can the sovereign do that's completely different, Steve?
So one of the biggest things, and you just got to follow what the politicians and the elite are doing. And the number one thing is they understand how entities work. They understand that the laws around different entities that create different protections that mean that your assets aren't yours. They're for something else. The biggest one we're seeing, especially in the US and Europe, is the rise of foundations again. The private interest foundation is rising in a great rate of knots, which means that people are stuffing assets into these vehicles and entities, and they are then divorced from them, and they'll stay there. Like during the rise of Hitler, Switzerland became Switzerland because it was willing to offer foundations and trusts and numbered bank accounts that divorce the people who really own the assets from the assets. And those vehicles are still with us today. One of the other things is turn off the media. So if you want to find the truth, triangulate. So what I mean by that is if you're trying to find the truth on an answer that's been put up, say, by Channel 9, find something on Sky News that opposes it, and then try and find the original source. So if it was the government that's put out a press release that they're reporting on, triangulate all three and you'll come up with something in the middle that's the actual truth. And that's what we've got to do. Even in like protecting your assets, you got to work out what's happening around the world and then move there. Just general diversification. Not all countries will go the same way. So I can pretty much say that the
really just wealth diversification is what you're saying.
Yeah, wealth diversification. The countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain, to some extent, I wouldn't be stashing most of my money there. I'd be looking at places like Singapore, Dubai, the Seychelles, Cayman Islands, all these places where the elite are using. And the easiest thing to do is just go and grab a copy of the Panama Papers or a copy of the Paradise Papers, and then find all the elites and where they got their money. Because ever since the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, all these leaks, nothing has changed about the laws around having those offshore entities. If anything, it's got easier in some places to have those, even though on the surface it looks harder. And that's because follow what the elites are doing.
That makes sense, because it makes me ask the question, do trusts or foundations, and which is better? Because this is a question, and I agree, by the way. I mean, the Clintons, I keep telling people, look at what the Clintons and the Gates they do. They have foundations, they have offshore private trusts, and they have their assets spread across many various things and not just all in one thing. So if Singapore goes down, they've got Australia. If Australia goes down, you've got somewhere else. In other words, they're kind of spread across the globe, you know? So would you agree with trust foundations, IVCs, and
Well, you sort of need a mixture of all. You can do a full family office and everything here and just use Australia if you wanted to, but that's not diversification. And we have trusts and that. But one of the things that I don't like with Australia is the way that most Australians are taught to use family trusts. And that is you have one person or two people, and you end up on both sides of the trust. What do I mean by that? You're either a trustee and a beneficiary. We've found now that the family court will penetrate that if you're on both sides. So be on one side or the other. You can still, as a trustee, you can still benefit from the assets that you control. And I know a lot of people that are the trustee and the head of their foundations or hybrid vehicles as a whole that have nothing to do with the day-to-day investments, but they still benefit from it. And that's the principle that I'd like to say is that all these things are great, but you've got to make sure that the structures are robust.
So really, you've got to make sure you do that. But if you're going to set foundations up, you've got to use them properly and be willing to put the time in and manage them, have the compliance and everything. Would you agree?
100%. But it's all about the management of them and making sure that you're managing them right. Because one slip, they'll find that slip and then try to dissolve the whole thing.
It makes me think of the difference between a sovereign and a slave, which really, I've noticed that sovereigns don't have any problem investing well to set up their structures. They'll put the right systems in. Where someone who thinks like a slave, all it's like is, oh, I don't want to spend that money, or I don't want to do it because it's too hard work. And then, they kind of then, of course, when problems happen, they come running frantically like, hey, can you help out? And like, well, no, your systems are so bad that if anyone looks at this, you're going to be caught.
So just about every law, and I'll get back to the sovereign slave thing in a minute. Just about every jurisdiction in the world will wind back any transaction between 6 and 9 months from the date of a lawsuit or a date of a divorce or a date of some instance. So there's no, once you get served, well, the time to do it was 12 months ago, not now, because as soon as you do that, you're defrauding under legislation. You're defrauding the whether you're right or wrong. You're defrauding the claimant. You're defrauding the person who's sued you. And that's the thing with are you a slave or a sovereign? A sovereign person has choice, and they create choice by putting things in place ahead of time, by being educated, by surrounding themselves with the right people, by having an abundance mentality, not a lack mentality. The person who turns out to be a slave at the end of the day is the person that they need to find 9,000 bits of what is it sort of they call these days, social acceptance of something, or they don't have the trust in themselves, and that's what you've got to do. So you've got to be able to create that mechanism that gives you the choice to be able to move and change and go with what's happening, right, without getting hesitant to start. It's exactly right. So all of us here have the same amount of time and energy given to us, So why aren't all of us billionaires? Right? 1% of the population are billionaires. And that's purely and simply because a billionaire or someone who's very, very wealthy gives themselves the opportunity and choice, but they also act.
Mm.
And they don't want everything to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect thing. Have a look at Microsoft, for instance. Microsoft has to be the best example of the 80-20 rule that I know, right? Its products are only ever 80% right when they launch them, and they continually keep updating them and patching them, and you've got to download the new version, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to pay for more. That's because they just did. And that's the rule that a sovereign lives for. You look at the 80-20, you quickly go bang, 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 bang. This is my choice. This is what I can do. And this is how I can do it.
Yeah, it's interesting you use Microsoft, because I remember reading a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and he talked about Microsoft as an example, and Bill Gates. He actually said how Bill Gates was much more cautious than almost any of the other entrepreneurs, but once he realized from his research he was right, he'd go in harder than anyone else, and that's how he got so big.
Mm. Yeah. And and a lot of people, like, if you take, a lot of people say, oh, I haven't done it because I don't have the knowledge, or I haven't done it because I don't have the right people, or I haven't done it because of this. Well, if you have a look at some of the greats, and Richard Branson's got a great saying is, and I instill this in all my staff, especially my senior staff in businesses, is say yes, and then we'll work it out down the track. So put your hand up and say, yes, I want to be sovereign, or yes, I want to be free, and then now go do it. You've set the goal, you've made the trigger, you pulled the trigger, so go out and do it. Don't wait to gather all the information and then pull the trigger, because it'll be too late. Elon Musk, another one.
Yes.
The Boring Company. He had no idea what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. He said yes and then triggered it and went and did it. And that's the difference that I find between the billionaires, the ultra wealthy, and the guys that truly live to that full non-slave existence.
Yes. I remember years ago, I had this boss when I was in a law firm who built a huge wealth. In fact, he was behind the founding of Law Central. That was Australia's #1 legal database. Yeah, he was the founder, the brainchild behind it. And he was an amazing boss. Like, he changed my life. But I still remember one example was he went and saw it. We had a client come into the office, and he was going and raving about, we are the best foundations company in Australia. We have masters in this area. I'm thinking, wow, okay, I didn't know we did all that. I've only been working with them for about 6 months. And he just said, we're the master in that area. We can set up this charitable trust, quoted some huge price. After I finished, I said to Brett, wow, I didn't know that was the case. I go, where's the precedent? She goes, we don't have any. And he goes, what do you mean we don't have any? And he said, he goes, well, I just said yes to the client, and now we've got to go do it. And I said to him, but where do I get the precedent? And he said, Warren, I believe in you. You'll work it out. He said, you better become the best in Australia in record time. Off you go. And he kicked me out, and I'm sitting there freaking out. But we pull it off. And he would always just say that. He would just push you.
And that's it. Like, a friend of mine in a business that I'm involved in does security training, and we wanted to do so the small arms and then the long arms training. And we didn't have any material. We didn't have an instructor. We didn't have anything. Got the contract and then went, shit, we're going to deliver this in 60 days. So, and had to just run around like mad. And the guy that heads up that business is a genius. And he just pulled it all together and then delivered the course. And then now it's a stable part of the course. And that's what I find gets you through quicker. Definitely. And I do it myself now. And, I've got to train myself and say, oh shit, there's like the other day we were talking about, like, Slovakia is coming out with a new citizenship by investment program. I said to a client, I'll dig something out of the files. I went, oh shit, I don't have anything. So I had to go rummaging around and found it. And I found the information, put the info pack together and got it to the client. And as a consultant, that's what you got to do. You've just got to go and find and do, or anyone that's doing this.
Well, no, exactly. Being adaptable, that's very important in this time. those who are rigid in their thinking are very much in trouble. So,
well, that's so. I'll just like really quickly on my background, how I got into this was purely and simply that I wanted to know how this worked for my family. So I went and travelled around the world. I went to the Cayman Islands. I went to the British Virgin Islands. I went to Singapore. Went to Hong Kong. Went to Dubai. But all these people sat down with lawyers and all that sort of stuff and asked, you know, and then worked it out from there. So,
yeah, well, I think no, it's good. It sounds like we're like-minded spirits, Stephen.
definitely.
Amber asked, does this mean we shouldn't be investing extra into super or index funds owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, as giving them more funds and powers?
That's a really good question. Now, it comes with a double. So it's actually a double-edged question, but it's a good one. In a way, yes, I would, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be left with all the assets. They're anointed. So if you're invested in there, you're going to have your money safe. Now, is it going to grow? Probably not. You know, as interest rates rise, are they going to increase the interest they pay you or the dividends they pay you? No, not really. So one, it could be a thing, because one of the things that we teach in the elite and the sovereignty investment stuff that we do is go where those in the know are going. So go and follow them. And so those in the know are putting their money with Vanguards, with BlackRock, with, you know, Fidelity and all those big companies, because they're pretty much going to be around. Be in the club and that sort of stuff. So once you know where the club is, go with the club. So that's a good question. Would I put everything in there? No way. You still want to have control of some of your own stuff, and hard assets, real assets, in different places around the world, like businesses, hotels, not so much hotels probably as long-term stay accommodation. So people that want to do 3 months, 6 months, that's a very big trend in Asia at the moment, where a lot of hotels are changing to that model, and they're selling out really quickly.
It's so true what you're saying, just copying because I know with myself, I became very good at tax planning by just copying what Google and the Catholic Church and the Adventist Church. I just studied what all the elite were doing, the Clintons, and copied them.
Yeah,
and got left alone.
Yeah, and that's all you got to do. And that's all I've been doing with most of the stuff I do, is look where they're going and look what they're doing. Remember, they make the laws to suit them, not to suit you.
Exactly. Yeah, so Amber asks also one other question. What you're saying is don't be appointer and trustee only one or the other in Australian trust. Is that right?
Yeah, so don't be on what I say, don't be on both sides of the trust. So don't be a beneficiary, a direct named beneficiary, and don't be a single trustee. The best thing to do is actually have multiple trustees. So have a corporate trustee with multiple directors running that trustee, because then you can actually say, well, I'm one of 3 votes. You know, I'm only one of 3 votes on the board. And even though you might control, because everyone knows that at the end of the day, he who has the gold makes the rules. But at the end of the day, you've got that structure. But it had been the sole director and sole shareholder of a trustee company and the major beneficiary. That's just inviting, especially the family court. They've already done it. They've pierced the trust with people that have been on both sides, and that sort of stuff. So, just be a little bit smart. And layering is one of the other ones I'd say. There is sometimes you've just got to layer 2 or 3 structures together to get the right outcome.
Carol asks, where do you find out where the elite invest?
A lot of it is just digging around in things like the Panama Papers. You know, like I found out so much by reading the Panama Papers and all those about where certain people were investing their funds, like the Queen. You know, the Queen had billions of dollars China, and I had to laugh. They said, "Oh yeah, but it's only like 2% of the net worth." Meanwhile, it's a couple of $1 billion, and it's tied up in these massive hedge funds run out of the Cayman Islands and stuff like that. The other thing is, have a look at where governments put their investment funds. So things like the Australia Fund is based in the Cayman Islands. It's not based in Australia. Things like that. Have a look where superannuation funds have some of their structures. The Commonwealth Bank, for instance, has a massive treasury operation in Malta.
Right.
So and you can find all this out because it's in their public companies. So all the information is in their public reports.
That's interesting. And Kat and Dean asked Stephen, what do you mean earlier when you said the Canadian truckers have already won? It doesn't look like they have.
So they've won because they've forced the government to show its hand of true totalitarianism. So now, if you do not take action and secure your future and you live in Canada, you've been warned, you've been told. This is if they're willing to enact that power to get rid of the truckers, what do you think they're going to do to you? That's what I mean by the truckers won. The truckers won because they made everyone see globally what is coming.
Yeah. That's for sure.
They might have won the long, long war, but they may have. But they definitely won that battle because, it's the nuclear option. The government went the nuclear option to kill them.
No, thank you for that. And John says, I heard that fiat can be backed by gold again. If you heard anything about this, certainly haven't heard anything about that.
No, I'm hearing it's going the other way.
Yeah, me too.
That they're trying to move. Gold is the most manipulated market on the planet because it's controlled by a lot of governments. And what I mean by that is that governments hold a lot of precious metals certificates without having the underlying physical products. So they don't want the price to skyrocket, but they want gold and silver and that to be around forever and a day. That's why it's a good insurance option because that governments are heavily invested in it.
Now, there's two more questions I'm going to take, and then we're going to finish our question. So the last two here. First one is from Amber. What's the easiest country to go offshore with?
Easiest country to go offshore? The one you hold a passport to. Because you have the rights of the citizen of that country. There's 196 NATO or UN defined countries in the world, and pretty much all of them are worthwhile to someone. So it's a hard question to answer which is the best. I'll give you my choice. Okay, so if I had my choice, it would be places like Costa Rica, Bahamas. In Asia, you'd be looking at the Philippines, moving over to the other side, where other side of the world, Dubai, then even into somewhere like Turkey, for instance, Mauritius. There's a number around the world that are good. If you say one of the other scenarios and things that we teach is the adjacent strategy. So sometimes if you want good access to something like, let's say Europe, you might go to Norway because Norway is not part of the EU.
Yeah, so it's case by case depending on where you're living. Yeah, that's what I've always said.
And it's case by case. Comes down to what passport you can get because most people can get a second passport through heritage. Most Australians come from somewhere, so it's yeah.
You mentioned changing ballpark. And the last question, Bree asked, why would ScoMo be putting 800 million into Antarctica? I didn't know that was the case. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I'd say actually more. So they're increasing our current 1.2 billion by 800 million to 2 billion a year. Australia controls about 67% of Antarctica. It is a very strategic thing for the Five Eyes nations. So there's radio listening bases down in Antarctica, and we're combating the US. We're combating China and other nations that are down there doing the same thing. So,
yeah.
And away we go.
Well, thank you, Steve. Any final thoughts before we end today to encourage people to do or not do?
Look, the biggest thing that I want to say is just go do.
Yeah, take action.
Take action. Even if it's something small, just go do, because it will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. Take some action. Always do. My rule is always take action and keep doing the small things, and the boring things you don't really want to do in the short term, in the long term, make life easier. Like I've become a real addict to business systems and process and compliance structures, which previously, a bit like you, Steve, I used to hate that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but I've become an addict to it because I see how much time it saves me when we get our systems right.
Systems are a great thing. There's I can't remember who it is. I was reading the book not so long ago, and I've just gone blank. But it basically says if you improved 1 to 2% every month on something, right? Say it was health or reading a book or something.
Yeah.
And you did it 1 to 2%. That's 24% to 50% a year.
Yeah.
That's a big. That is a big improvement. So yeah, small steps and away you go. And
well, I was saying this to my sons in building the Global Wealth Club. I said to them just recently, we were talking about this issue, and I said, I remember building a law firm, and I'm naturally not good at procedures and systems, those who know me. And I built a very successfully outsourced automated wills estate planning firm that was the envy of many lawyers. And you know how hard that would be to build with Filipino staff. And it was because simply what I did was every day I made a challenge to myself to do one small step towards it. And I think within 4 months, I had the whole thing automated. So every day, like day 1 would be a video. Day 2 would be another video. Day 3, I'd write up a document. Day 4, I'd write up a checklist, things like that every day.
100%. One little improvement every day or one little thing. So I'm going through at the moment, rewriting a whole heap of bits and pieces for my publication, updating them. And then I flip them off to my staff to finish them. But I just make one improvement, do one thing every day, and then all of a sudden, 6 weeks go and go, oh shit, it's all done.
Well, it's like the Global Wealth Club. We've been slowly recording videos, and we got like heaps of free videos now on our website, like heaps of really good ones, just because we kept slowly doing it.
Yeah.
No, thank you for your time, Stephen. I really appreciate it. And
no problem.
And yeah, I would listen to what Stephen's wisdom. He's been a great mentor for us. A very switched on guy, has worked with the elite. And so when he's saying take action, he means it. Stephen's an action guy. He hates fluffy words. And and the other thing I probably mentioned as well is this weekend we've got a crypto event. So if you haven't registered, come along. We're going to be teaching on structuring and that with cryptos and giving some insight into that one. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Stephen. And we'll see you all. Sorry?
I've registered for the weekend because this is my year. So one of the things that I set as a goal this year was to learn completely the ins and outs of crypto.
Yeah.
So I'm on crypto things all over the place. And yeah, doing a fair bit with NFTs at the moment. So.
Oh wow, I've got to talk more about that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye then.